Hello, my name is Steve Querin, and this video series is about me creating naval warships based on this game system, IRONCLADS ETHER FLYERS. This was inspired. This video series is actually inspired by Donald J. Trump's Golden Fleet. I have done this concept already for the IRONCLADS Ether Flyers campaign setting for, within the History of Querinworld campaign, Mega General campaign setting. But I cannot find the paperwork, so I'm just going to redo it anyways to show you the processes of what's going on Naval Warship design. Within the last video, I talked about naval vessels, mission rows, and oh, okay. Timber. Okay, that's not it. Okay, I'll talk about naval vessel types and civilian, the mission rows of civilian naval vessels within the naval types. One of the mission rows that I did not mention was research and exploration. And that is both there's a civilian application and there is a military application for that. The civilian applications would be okay, I don't have a back one. I'll go front and back. Okay. I'm also using a different clipboard from the last videos I've been using. This is an older clipboard and it got broke. That's why I just duct tape on here. So the research for civilian research, naval research, you have the Mariana Trench exploration. You have the oceanic life research and exploration, mapping of the oceans and stuff like that. With the military research, you're dealing with weapon systems and warship designs, and basically that's about it. And military technology like sonars. With civilians, you're also doing exploration of sunken ships. So underneath the flyers, Canadian Navy, Querinworld is a fictional nation of my own creation. It was primarily a D&D campaign nation. But it advanced to the History of Querinworld nation. Okay, so this is military. Mission rules. Now these mission rules are some of the mission rules are dependent on the naval vessel size and or naval vessel classifications, but some are not. So research and rescue is a military, not research, search and rescue, sorry. Search and rescue is a military does engage in activities primarily for their own military personnel. But they can be called in for the National Coast Guard civilian defense for purpose of deep sea activity, rescues and stuff, major accidents like the Titanic sinking or the oil tanker sinking, whatever. There's a major. So they have search and rescue ships. Hospital, within the, some of these concepts were spurred on, were conceived for the Ultimate Admiral DREADNOUGHTS game system. Like the PSR, Police Search and Rescue ship designs. Those ships are primarily designed to serve as hospital ships and as rescue ships and as ship capture crews. You got surrendered ships, and the PSRs would go and capture the surrendered ships. Now, I don't think that Ultimate Admiral DREADNOUGHTS had game mechanics for capturing surrendered warships, or had may or may not have had game mechanics for rescuing sailors. Now, there was sailor rescuing going on. There was calculations on that, but I decided I'm going to make some PSRs for the purpose of going out there and saving sailors. That's their job. They're going. There's people. If there's a ship that's sunk, they go by the ship and rescue the people next to the ship that's been sunk. If there's a ship that's surrendered, it goes next to the ship and captures the ship. That was the purpose of the PSR. That's not part of the IRONCLADS Ether Flyers game system mechanics. Coastal Defense Forces, Port Defense Forces, that was part of the IRONCLADS Ether Flyers mechanics, but there is also additional mechanics of that Ultimate Admiral DREADNOUGHTS brought in. Got me thinking more seriously about than when I was with the IRONCLADS Ether Flyers game system. So you have like naval blockades, you have land campaign, shoreline, fleets, assistance, So there's that. So you got search and rescue, got hospital ships, which would be well, you would have auxiliary ships, which is these would be the auxiliary ships would be ships that would carry additional ammo, additional fuel, additional food supply, for for the fleet. You got some ships would need to be you have ship ranges, and within ultimate dreadnoughts more you have greater variety of ship range with an ultimate admiral dreadnoughts than what you have with ironclads and ether flyers. And so when you're transferring from one part of the world to another, your ships has a limited amount of fuel, so they have to go to ports and get fuel and stuff. And within, so even though they do not have that, that's game mechanics for auxiliary ships and stuff like that, and ultimate admiral dreadnoughts. That was, that's factor in how you get to port, and you got to go to various ports across to get to from one part of the world to another, from England to Japan via the Mediterranean Sea. So auxiliary. Transport. Okay. And then you have your transport ships, which okay, I'm going to knock out auxiliary, because what I describe as auxiliary is actually a transport. And what auxiliary means in the Navy is a non-combat ship, or a tertiary ship design. Basically, like an auxiliary carrier is not, an auxiliary carrier would be aircraft carrier that's designed to transport aircraft from port to port or port to fleet, from ship to ship. And they're not really designed for initiating, launching aircraft to strike an enemy fleet or an enemy base. That's not their primary. That's not their purpose. That's not what they're meant to do. So you have auxiliary carriers. You would have and then there are auxiliary ships that are primary fuel. But that's going to be classified under transports, and the ship class, the ship name and signature, like the BB1 or something like that, would be have a transport signature. So, so another mission role is scouting. This is going to get rid of the ship. This transport, hospital, These are all. Okay, you got the purpose of scout. Scout is what it says. You're looking out. You're looking for the enemy. You're being the eyes and ears when you're in combat. Scout ships serve as forward observers to help target the enemy, because in World War II and even in World War I, naval ships, especially battleships, can hit enemy ships beyond the horizon, and by having scout ships beyond the horizon, they can still communicate and target, call the shots, or determine, say the enemy's over here, your shot placement is here, you need to move this over here. So got minesweepers and mine layers. Now, some ships were designed specifically for sweeping, some were specifically for laying, some had combined the two roles. It really was dependent on the naval vessel size and capability, for it to be a sweeper or a layer or layer. So I'm just going to do sweeper layer or mine warfare. Let's simplify this thing a little bit. Now, some destroyers had minesweeping capabilities, in addition to their other mission roles. Torpedo attacks. When the torpedo was developed in the 1800s, in the 1890s and 1900s and 1910s, almost every warship type had torpedo tubes on them. At that time, torpedoes had very short range. They were very slow, and for the most part, they were due to craw. Mercenary killing attacks on. You got a warship that's seriously damaged that can't do nothing. You use torpedoes to quickly sink the thing, so that you don't have to worry about it anymore. Instead of waiting for days for the ship to sink, you have small ship hunters. These would be your torpedo boat destroyers in the 1870s, 1880s, and 1890s. Although around in the 1890s, the torpedo boats and torpedo destroyers just blurred into the destroyer. So the torpedo techs, so with the torpedo techs back in when the torpedoes were first developed, were being researched and developed, they were put on coastal vessels that was basically equivalent to modern day speedboats and modern day bass boats. And then once they became a viable weapon system platform, torpedo boat destroyer ships had to design a new warship. They had to have a new warship concept just to deal with the torpedo boats, because the torpedoes were very fast and very small, and if they got into, and they could get into close range, torpedo range, which is basically at that time small arms fire range of the ships, and small arms being infantry, infantry weaponry and civilian weaponry, rifles, machine guns, range. And so in order to counter that, they needed to create a new warship design, and they called it a torpedo boat destroyer. And they were very light, they're very small, and they only had small guns, 3-inch guns basically, and machine guns to deal with the torpedo boats. And so that's an example of a small ship hunter. Transport hunter. These transports within the Ironclads Ether Flyers is a different, Ironclads, they're called merchant ships. And Ultimate Naval Dreadnoughts, and I think Rule of the Waves. I'm not really familiar with Rule of the Waves that much. I only watched a few videos, and most of that was doing the ship design. I saw some combat. I think that transports were NPCs. I did not see a lot of combat with the transports, so I'm not sure how the transport mechanics work. You may be able to custom design transports and Rule the Waves. And Ultimate Naval Dreadnoughts, you cannot. I've been watching Ultimate Naval Dreadnought videos for about 4 or 5 years, so I'm really familiar with Ultimate Naval Dreadnoughts. They are NPCs, and they're non-combat ships. So transports and small ships are two different things. Small ships would be your torpedo boats, your destroyers, and your light cruisers. Okay. Transport hunter. Then you're going to have your cruiser hunters. Small ship hunters will also be hitting, small ship hunters could be going after scout ships, and cruiser hunters can go after scouts, depending on how big the scout ship is. The scout ships could be very small, like destroyers, or like cruisers. Primarily, destroyers and like cruisers would be your scout ships. within the high seas fleet. Destroyer-sized scouts would be faster than the cruiser scouts, but the cruiser scouts can also have bigger weapons and longer range than what a destroyer scout would have. So, within Ultimate Admiral Dreadnoughts, if you start out in the 1880 campaign, which is the earliest you can start, you do not have the destroyer hull. You have to research that. And so you end up getting destroyers, depending on how you do your campaign, somewhere between 1885 and 1890. Or 1895. And when you start on the 1890 campaign, you do have the destroyer hull. So within the Ultimate Dreadnoughts, you start out with a cruiser scout, and then you can downgrade to the destroyer scout, which has faster speed and better torpedo capabilities than what your cruiser has. So you let's see here. Got your big gun only warship design. This would be the well, actually, correction, monster gun. Let's start out with the monster gun first. I made a hole in there. There's a hole right there, and okay. Let's start with the monster gun. Back in the 1840s and 1860s, 1850s, the naval artillery guns went from smoothbore cannons to breech-loading rifled artillery guns. And the cannon, and we went from cannonballs to shells, high explosive shells and armored piercing shells. There was even back in the cannon days, you had grape shot, but there's different shell iterations, shell design iterations. And so, in the 1840s and 1850s, the biggest guns were around 9 inches, 10 inches. And then in the 1860s and 1870s, bigger was better, because the bigger the shell, the longer the range. Mostly due to inertial energy. So they went from 9, 10 inches to 12 inches, 13 inches, 14 inches, 15 inches. They went up to 18 inches. Then but they were very slow to fire, and the shell accuracy was not that good because quality control was not, they did not have quality control on their metallurgy, on the gunpowder, and for the metallurgy for the shells, on the metallurgy for the guns, on the on the metallurgy for the ship hulls, for the iron. So there is a lot of speculation as to how accurate the ships were, these big guns were. And in the 1870s, two nations decided to take their big ships at each other. They stayed stationary at 400 yards, and they were firing 17-inch guns and 18-inch guns, and they missed completely. And so from the 1880s and through the 1890s, they went down to 9, 10, 11, 12-inch guns. 9, 10, 11-inch guns. And then when the HMS Dreadnought came out in 1902 and 1906, she had 12-inch guns, and then, and she was an all big gun only ship design. So, but these monster gun ships were basically big gun only ships because well, to a certain degree, some of them were big gun only because the weight was so much that you really couldn't have room for anything else. So you got your monster gun ships, which is your supersized. Then your big gun only. You have the big guns, but you don't have secondaries and tertiaries. And back in the 1860s, 1840s, 1840s through the 1880s, producing the various guns and stuff was very, naval artillery gun production was very slow, and ship designs required a lot of different guns, and they couldn't keep up with the production, so they ended up with combination guns. You had some of your ships had the main gun had two different gun sizes for the main gun armament, and one's for long range hitting power, and one's for short range rapid fire capability, and it had those. So you end up ships with 5 or 6 different gun sizes, and this was true for that mix was also true for secondaries and tertiaries. Your tertiary armament was basically your anti-personnel armament because the 1800s airplanes didn't come about until 1908. Even though airplanes were being researched in the 1880s, nothing was flying. So the idea of warplanes was not even on the papers. So you're dealing with anti-personnel because you're still dealing. Most of your combat was happening at 400-yard range. So where ships can shoot at each other with machine guns and rifles. So you had secondary guns and tertiary guns to knock out enemy ships. And the monster, you had really, really huge. The monster gun ships would have really huge, even though they may or may not have secondary guns. Your big gun only ships, like the HMS Dreadnought, did not have secondary guns. Now they did have tertiary guns to deal with torpedo boats and destroyers, and and torpedo boat destroyers. And that's also what the purpose of anti-personnel and small boat defense. Um, let's see here. What else? Missing rows. You have cruisers were the most varied concept of the warships was the cruiser. You had light cruisers, you had unarmored cruisers, light cruisers, heavy cruisers, armored cruisers. Well, let's see here. In the 1860s to 1880s, you had unarmored cruisers, light cruisers, protected cruisers, and armored cruisers. And then with the Washington Treaty of 22, you had light cruisers and armored cruisers. And then with with the London 1930 London Treaty, you had light cruisers and heavy cruisers. The light cruisers in the 1860s and 1880s time period fell into two categories: unarmored and protected cruisers. But light cruisers could also mean that you had light guns, smaller guns on the thing. But you can have, 6-inch guns and small armor. But you can also have an 8-inch gun, but the cruiser is smaller than, maybe like 5,000 tons instead of 10. Let's see how to do this. You would have like a light cruiser could be a 10,000 ton ship with 6-inch guns. Light cruiser could be also a 2,000 ton ship with 8-inch guns. 5,000 tons, well I said 10,000. So 5,000 tons with 8-inch guns. That would be all classified as a light cruiser also. So there was a lot of confusion about what's going on the warship classes. And cruisers, the cruiser hulls, was the workhorse of the navies. They were the scout ships. They were the mini battleships. A mini battleship is basically a cruiser that's armed like a battleship, does not have battleship gunnery, main artillery, but the main armament and their armor scheme is comparable with that of a battleship, and its speed is comparable with that of a battleship. Battleships are the slowest warship prior to the 1930 London Treaty. Battleships were prior to HMS Dreadnought, battleships were the slowest warships in the fleet. When HMS Dreadnought came out, it was the one had the speed of a cruiser and was big only ships, and I classify that as a dreadnought. Then they said that after Dreadnought, they made bigger guns. They started putting secondary guns on, and they called these super dreadnoughts. And that was the term that they was used at the time. I do not consider those as dreadnoughts, because for me, a dreadnought is a big gun only ship, a battleship design, and a fast battleship design. Post HMS Dreadnought, the Dreadnought battleships started losing their speed. Well, they had the cruiser speed. They were fast as cruisers. But then the cruiser speeds went up and went faster than the dreadnoughts. So the super dreadnoughts, when the super dreadnoughts came out in the 1910s, they were again the slowest warship on the seas, slowest naval combatants. Prior to HMS Dreadnought, your combat speed, the minimum combat speed you really want your warships to have is 15 knots. But they range between 15 and 20 knots. HMS Dreadnought went to 22 knots. Well, none of the battleships went 20 knots. The fastest battleships was 18, maybe 19 knots. But your cruisers were hitting 20 knots in the 1850s and 1880s and in 1900 and 1890s. So HMS Dreadnought was faster than all the cruisers, and so it was as fast as cruisers, but it could so mini battleships is like a battleship, but it's a pocket battleships, like of the World War II era, Germany's pocket battleships. Okay, they're not as big as battleships can be. They're not battleship hulls; they're cruiser hulls. But they can take a punishment and they can dish it out. The ways your light cruisers, your protected cruisers, and your armored cruisers could not. Well, mini battleships is a type of armored cruiser. It's a mission rule. An unarmored cruiser had no armor. Light cruisers prior to the Washington Treaty, like I said, was classified as unarmored or protected. A protected cruiser primarily did not have any armor except as deck armor. Now, they may have had some turret armor. Some had turret armor, some did not. And then with the Washington treaties, or since 1900, light cruisers had light armor on there. Well, since World War I. Across all, and then your armored cruisers had all. You had your deck armor. You had a turret armor. You had conning tower armor. You had battery armor, bulkhead armor. But then with the 1930s and with the London Treaty of the 1930s, your light armor cruisers had the same armor schemes that the armor cruiser has, but not as much armor as what an armored cruiser would have. And so they even tried to come up with the battle cruiser, which is a cruiser with a battleship-sized gun on it that would, chase down other cruisers on the big gun cruisers. And so there was a lot of experimentation, and by the 1920s, the naval technology was so advanced that you could do almost anything you want with a warship design. And people were coming in with designs that were off the wall, one trick pony, that when designs that would sink the moment you put it to sea, or kill the crew when they fired a weapon. Destroy the ship and kill the crew that fires the weapon. Or, and the one-trick pony made the situation that the warship was designed for may not even realistically happen. And using it for any other purpose was like, nope, not going to work. So the Washington Treaty of 1922 curtailed a lot of that BS warship designs and started standardizing stuff. So people say, okay, this is a cruiser, this is a battleship, this is a destroyer, this is a frigate, okay, this is a torpedo boat. So, let's see here. Torpedo boat, small ship hunter, transport, cruiser hunter, most big. Shore bombardment. Now with these mission roles, you can mix and match these mission roles. They do not have to be, a ship does not have to have one mission role and one mission role only. They can be designed to have multiple mission roles. For example, you can have a scout that is a mine warfare, minesweeper, or mine layer. You can have a scout ship that's a small ship hunter, or that's a torpedo attack vessel. Okay, you can have a small ship hunter with torpedo attack capabilities. Your small ship hunter can be a transport hunter, also a double as a transport hunter. Okay. Okay. Your monster gunship could be a big unknown ship. It could be a shore bombardment ship. Hang on. Let's see if you can. There's a lot of glare. Okay, so that's it for the time being.